This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn and I are joined again by Tim Auld, a writer-director whose veteran action film Minotaur won 5 screenplay competitions and has now been optioned. Tim's short films have been selected for various festivals, most notably Palm Springs International. And in 2022, he directed a pilot for a 6-part television series set in London. Tim is determined to make meaningful action films that his wife and daughter would watch over and over again. So Tim, welcome back. Thank you so much we're excited to have you with us again.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Definitely. So we thought we would talk about the hero today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Tim. What aspect of the hero should we talk about, or just heroes in general? Bring us into the topic.
Well, like what we talked about with didacticism, it's another word that gets used a lot. But do we understand what we really mean, or what we think we mean when we talk about a hero? And I spend a lot of time thinking about what affects us the most emotionally when we consume a story, and I'm always thinking about screenwriting and screen stories. So I can't speak to the hero when it comes to novels, but I imagine it's more or less the same because it's all still based on myth. So that's where we've all come from, and that's when we talk about heroes, it's the same source material. So the way I think about a hero is, but 2 things that I sort of focus on. Number one is it's very easy to forget, especially with screenwriting and making films, especially because you cast actors. It's very easy to forget that a hero is not a person. And even though a person does portray a hero, but the hero is actually an agent of theme. And right down at the core, that's what they're supposed to do. They are supposed to represent a theme through action. I think that it's just easy to lose sight of that. So it's something you should keep it as your North Star, that the hero is they can be anything you want them to be. I don't really buy into this hero wouldn't make that choice argument, because, well, they just did. So there you go. They just made the choice.
Insert ASMR typing here.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I like to think about a lot is how to generate the most emotional resonance with the story, and I think that what we respond to the most is what I like to call ordinary heroism, and that is something to remember with all heroes, that they must be manifestly inadequate. That is a fundamental facet to a hero. They have to be inadequate. They have to be in over their heads. I don't think flawed is the right way to think about it. I think some people get carried away with writing flawed heroes, when they just need to be inadequate and suffer on their path to a greater understanding. So when I think about ordinary heroism, I think a really good example of that is, you can type it into YouTube. If you just look up orangutan versus crane, you'll see what I mean. I think that's the most poetic visual to demonstrate what you should be doing with your hero. So it's this footage of this crane destroying a forest somewhere in the Amazon, and one orangutan is hitting it with a stick, and it won't give up. And it's amazing. It's really emotional footage. That, to me, is what all you should be thinking about with your hero. Make your hero an orangutan versus a crane, and you will get emotional resonance. You will get buy-in from an audience.
Wow. When you said crane, I was picturing the bird. So I'm picturing like the skinny, long-necked bird and an orangutan.
Like
How
the
is that
orangutan's
going to
gonna
play
win.
out? I know. But then I caught on. I caught on.
The crane is, they got long beaks. It's pecking.
They do.
Yeah.
I know. Right around Amazon jungle, I was like,
Oh.
okay.
Oh,
Other kind of
maybe I
crane.
should have. Maybe I
Yeah.
should have said bulldozer.
So if anyone else was, taking that turn with me, you aren't alone.
It made the story more powerful, didn't it?
It did. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. Yes. Oh, I wrote it down because I love it so much. The hero is an agent of theme. That's brilliant. We talk about theme so much on the podcast. And, as novelists, we give so much time and attention to developing our protagonist and making sure our protagonist is a real person with history and backstory and flaws and all of that good stuff. But at the end of the day, this very real person, our protagonist, is going on a journey through a character arc, which is conveying the theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
3 strands.
And certainly sorry, say that again.
I said 3 strands. They're all interwoven.
3 strands, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
certainly the
so
screenwriting, it has to be depicted through action or through choices that they make that are outside of their head. I mean, it can be in their head, but it has to be done through action. So that's how we get around that. You can't get, unlike, what's great about novels is you can go inside their thoughts, but on screen you have to depict it through action. So the way we see it is through their choices, the choices they make from A to B, down to, simple choices like what they decide to eat for breakfast. But then it's the dramatic choices when they're faced with a real moral dilemma that tell you the theme of the film and tell you what the character is all about.
Right. Right. Well, and in novels, we need to depict our characters' arc through their choices and through action as well. But then we also have the support of narrative. And I think a lot of writers, a lot of novelists would benefit from dabbling in screenwriting, whether it becomes a thing they really pursue or not. Because when you're writing a script, whether it's for the theater or for film, you need to distill everything down into the action that can be seen on the stage, So when we leave the stage of the page too much and go internal with our story, we can lose some of the power of those external moments, of those choices playing out in action and in interaction with our setting, with our supporting characters and such. Yeah. So I just wanted to riff on that for a minute. I'm like, okay, and next.
Sorry, you're right, and I probably I didn't mean to imply that novels. Yeah, you don't have to create choices because you're absolutely right. Of course you do. I think that one thing that certainly anyone who's come from writing novels to screen, they would find that the hardest transition is that it all has to be filmed. It all has to be filmable. That's one of the most common notes that you get on a screenplay is, but how do we show that? How do we show that so and so is feeling rejected in this moment? And you can't just say, well, an actor will show it with their face. It's you've got to think more about like what choice do they make? What do they decide to do?
Can we talk about that? Because I think that would be such a brilliant craft conversation for our audience who are novelists, because we also don't have actors to just emote on the page. And so when we want to show the hero's choice and those consequences through the action on the stage, whether it's the screen or the page in a novel, how do we do that? Can you give us some insight and some tips there?
Yeah, I mean, I think something I think about is I've got the fortune of having directed stuff, so I know what it feels like when you're trying to make it happen on a set from the page, and you know very quickly if you have something that um, isn't immediately playable because an actor won't know what to do. And so I think even if you don't have actors, you're still going to turn up with a camera, and what do you shoot? What do you cut that with? So you still have to be thinking from the page, the meaning that is implied here on the page. Let's say it's I'm going to think of David Mamet's example, but it's like, how do you show late? The concept is late. The person's late. How do you show that? And you may have already written in the script, like he's running late, but then what do you show in shots? And so you really should be directing on the page as well. Screenwriters are directors. They're just direct with words on the page, and then a director comes in and will then interpret that and add to it. But your script's not really going to go very far from the get-go if it is essentially a novel that you've then put into screenplay format. You know, it has to be visual in all cases at all times. So I suppose one thing you would want to think about is if character A's state of mind is such, what would they do that expresses that state of mind?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're anxious, yes, they might be feeling anxious, and a real person might be very good at hiding that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of a hero, what you need to show is that they're doing something through action that exemplifies anxiousness. So they'll be, you know, biting the nails or scratching at something, or you could do a really nice juxtaposition where they're perfectly measured in one shot, but then the next shot you have them bursting into a bathroom stall and puking. So immediately we know, oh my God, they were holding it in the whole time. And so yeah, that's the sort of language that you need to start training yourself in, I suppose, if you're going to move from one discipline to screenwriting.
Is 2024 the year you take your writing to the next level? Would you like to join a select group of fellow writers to expand your craft knowledge while working on your novel? Do you want to see your page count growing week by week and have ongoing access to an expert writing coach? New sessions of group coaching are starting soon after the new year. Schedule your free discovery call with me today. I'd love to meet you and answer any questions you have about group coaching. Go to wordessential.com/fiction coaching to schedule your call today. P.S. Not a joiner? I have individual coaching spots opening up in 2024 as well. Schedule that free discovery call with me at wordessential.com/fiction coaching. Right. Or even if you aren't making a transition like that, I love what you were just saying, like that example of bursting into the bathroom stall and throwing up, because
We've all been there, so
yeah,
it's pretty universal,
right.
isn't it?
Right. You know, as writers, you can rely on narrative. As novelists, you can over rely on narrative, or you can get lazy about finding those illustrations of the feeling you should be capturing to add that layer of intensity to the moment. So you could say, you know, John rushed through the apartment, grabbed his coat and keys off the hook, and slammed the door and forgot to lock it. And that's really boring, right? You can give the action, but if you don't think of how you show what this means, like, you know, rushing into the bathroom and throwing up, now we've got something that has subtext to it. It's got a layer of meaning that just rushing doesn't.
Yes. I mean, what you could do in your first example is you could have the character run back in and, do a quick, what's the sign of the cross or something like that
Yeah.
to the wall or something like that, and then run back out. And you know, oh my God, he can't leave the house without doing that. That's important to him. That's a ritual. So you immediately know something about that character. Whereas that may not be in the novel form, because you may have had pages of explanation or backstory about his Catholicism and stuff like that. So we may already know that's important. But if you've only got one shot to do it with, and it's the opening shot of the film, that might be a way to do it. I think another really great example is the film Sling Blade, and which I love this film. I think it's really underrated, even though it won the Oscar. But there's a scene later in the film where Carl, who's played by Billy Bob Thornton, he stays the night with some friends, and they say, well, you can use our daughter's room. She's not here. You can sleep in her bed. And then the father comes in the next morning to wake him up and says, it's time to go. And he's still sitting on the bed, and he's been there all night, and he didn't want to lie in the bed, But not only that, when they get up to leave, he takes the time to just smooth over the crease that he left on the bed. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like that's all done through action, and it tells you everything you need to know about a character.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, all right. We've maybe veered a little bit away from just discussing the hero into this kind of show don't tell, subtext, character depictions through action, which is fine. We do that all the time on the show because it's a conversation, right? And not scripted. Yeah. But maybe bring us back to the idea of the hero. I'm wondering where you think people are getting it wrong.
Writing ideals. That's where they're getting it wrong. They're writing idealized heroes, people who are paragons, and they're like the word Mary Sue gets bandied around a lot, but it's a character who's perfect and always right, and that's, nobody can empathize with that. It's people who suffer and fail that we empathize with, and that's what you should be remembering with your hero. They have to be inadequate. They have to fail. They have to suffer on their way towards a deeper truth. So something to just try to practice is just looking at the things that you are most emotionally affected by. And it's never that. It's always, you just read the news every day. Just read the story about a mother who jumps into freezing cold rapids to save her dog, and you go, that's heroic. and it's somebody who's not got the requisite skills, but they do it anyway. They face danger. So I've done a lot of research on September 11 for my own stuff, and so I know far too much about that day. And you can't. I mean, there's about 1,000 examples on that day of people doing amazingly heroic things, small things and big things. You go from the passengers on United 93 deciding we're gonna stop these guys. The heroism in that is incredible, and the film's incredible too. But down to like just people, letting people stay in their shop or stay at their house who've come out of the rubble or come out just after the towers fell. And there were F-16 pilots who were ready to launch from the runway of an airbase. They didn't have time to put missiles on their planes, but they were going to go the plan was, we're going to have to ram the plane. They were ready to do it. They didn't have to do it because the passengers on United 93 did it.
Okay.
I mean, so it didn't work out that way, but they were about to go. And there's just so many moments like that. So what I'm trying to get at is the quality of the hero is inadequacy. They're not ready for whatever it is that's facing them, but they do it anyway. The orangutan is never going to break the crane, but it's going to fight it anyway with that stick.
Mhm.
So that's the quality you should put into your hero. And that's, if you're wanting the deepest emotional resonance from your audience, you'll get it from that. You won't get it from them being able to breeze through obstacles.
Right. Yeah. So when you create a character, a hero who is inadequate for the challenge coming in the climax,
Mhm.
how do you go about creating the arc that leads to them being successful in the climax? Right? Because they start
They have to,
inadequate, but are they still inadequate by the time they meet the final conflict?
they have to have a chance. They can't have absolutely no chance at all. But I think it was in your last episode you mentioned Kung Fu Panda, and I thought it was
Oh,
the
yeah.
best example. Actually, a great
We love
example.
Kung Fu Panda.
We do.
It's brilliant. And in fact, so many animated films are brilliant because they work in this world of metaphor. So they get it right. They understand the language better than people who work in live action. Yeah, I mean, I forget how that all resolves, but I imagine that he uses something that he does know to overcome the final conflict, or he has some deep inner. I know it's about him learning self-belief, but he still has to overcome the bad guy in the end, and I can't remember how he does it, but I imagine it relies on some knowledge of. Doesn't he work in a noodle shop or something? Does it rely on something like that he
Right.
knows from there, or something like that? I can't remember, but so they do need to have a chance, but they also have to rise to that. And yeah, I suppose that they learn things along the way. They learn skills along the way. It depends on the gap between the achievement and where they're at the beginning, you know. So in the Karate Kid, you know, he's learned a couple of moves at the beginning, but he's getting his butt kicked at school. But he's got a chance of learning karate, and he's got a chance of getting all the way to the finals of the karate tournament because he's got the time and he learns enough along the way. So it's not like he's an amputee with no legs and no arms, but he's still doing the same challenge. You know, you'd have to invent a different challenge for that character.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So in both of those films, we've got the apprentice journey, and so we've got Sifu and we've got Mr. Miyagi as examples for Panda and for the Karate Kid, so that they and the audience can see what is possible, what he can aspire to. And of course, the goal is not to be Sifu or Mr. Miyagi, it's to make it to that final conflict or competition. But what if we aren't in an apprentice story? What if we don't have the master teacher? Then do we still need to have an example present for the audience to sort of latch on to say, this is where our hero is going in terms of who he can become to meet that final conflict?
I think it needs to be in some way apparent that if this person applied themselves in the right way, that they could overcome these overwhelming odds. And Erin Brockovich just came to mind. So in Erin Brockovich, the first half hour, she's up against what? Is it a corporation that she's really up against? She's up against this sort of huge amount of power. She's up against the law, which she doesn't know. But we see in the first half hour how enterprising she is, how smart she is. So when she decides, well, I'll just learn, that you know, you can buy that journey, and so by the end, she's not fighting a dragon or doing a kung fu tournament. She's doing something that is within that world of plausibility that we've seen that this person could, if they applied themselves and learned the necessary skills along their journey, that they could overcome that final obstacle, as big and as hard as it might be. Yeah, it's a really good question. That I don't know if there's an obvious answer. I mean, I think this is something that maybe is unconscious when you're working. What do you think? Like
Yeah.
when you think about your heroes
Yeah.
and their journey.
Well, I think plausibility is a really important word. That's something we always have to keep in mind, because if you take your hero to a step in the journey somewhere, maybe in the second half of Act Two, and you lose your reader because it's not plausible, because we can't believe the hero would make that choice, right? Well, then you have to go back and say, what do I need to do to prepare the hero and the reader for that choice that leads to this next stage in the conflict, right? Whether it's a choice like going here, going there, or it's a choice like being in a situation, right? A plot situation we need them to be in, but suddenly it's not plausible anymore. You lose your reader. So I don't know if you need an example the way I was talking about it with like a Mr. Miyagi per se, but you're right that we need to see the feasibility of this character's growth, and like seeing that Erin Brockovich is resourceful and she's a fighter and she's already been knocked down by life a bunch of times and she keeps getting up, and you know she values like her children. We see what we need to see about her character in order to believe she is going to keep fighting for this community that's being harmed by the dragon, by the big corporation.
It's the traits adequate, skills inadequate balance, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So you've got
Absolutely.
the inherent qualities that are more or less fixtures of the person, right? But then you've got the other elements, the skills that then evolve and grow as the character progresses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about another example where it could, because they don't have to achieve their goal as well. The example I'm thinking of is like you could have, let's say your film is about a girl who's 8 years old who decides, I want to build a rocket. Now we know that she's not going to build a functioning NASA rocket because she couldn't possibly have the knowledge and the expertise or the resources. But what she might end up doing is building some kind of propulsion firework thing that does actually launch off the ground. But it's actually not even about that. It's about, a project that she's trying to do that brings her and her father together or something like that. So we see that, okay, that she doesn't have to achieve the ultimate thing that she said she was going to try to achieve. What she's doing is achieving this other thing. So yeah, I don't, but it's sort of built into the world that's around the hero, isn't it? Like we know on a level as an audience what to expect and what level of success to expect.
Right.
But yeah, it's a real balancing act though, isn't it? Like showing inadequacy in a way where we can still buy the the overcoming of odds. And the funny thing is, the more you read about real life and real people doing things, the more you realize how different real life and fiction is. Because, the stuff I read about September 11, I think if you just put that in a film, no one would buy it. They'd be like, he couldn't do that. He could never do that. He couldn't lift 6 people and bring them down 100 flights of stairs. And it's like, no, it happened. He did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
But a lot of times you're going to get interviews with like family or friends where they're like, well, yeah, that was the kind of guy he was, right? Like he would have just put you on his back and carried you because that's the kind of person he was. So then if you have people that know him, they're like, well, of course he just kept putting people on his back. What else was he going to do? And so I think, again, that goes back to the traits. Like you build a character that has the gumption the ability and like the personality where somebody says, yeah, it put in that situation, yes, he would respond in that way. Now, whether or not he's capable of doing it is where you can have, failure and disappointment and, problems that need to be overcome, that then lead to the climax. But I think you always want it to be plausible that that person would, in placed into a situation, step up in some manner or shape or form. You don't want to make them such a wallflower or such a, depending on what situation you're putting them into, where even their friends and family be like, me, not the kind of person who would do that. You got to have it built in. That's what Act 1 is for.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and what you said, Kathryn, points out that in real life, we learn about people retroactively. So the man does the heroic thing, rescuing 6 people. And then the interviewer goes and finds the friends and family. And it's like we get the character development after the fact to support the act that happened. But when we're writing our story arcs, we're doing the character development first, and we're putting all of those pieces into place so that when the hero is heroic, we believe it because those traits have been established.
Yeah.
Just to go back to what you were asking before about where are we getting this wrong, I think that there's sometimes an unwillingness to show characters failing and suffering particularly, but maybe more failing. I don't see a lot of failing. I see characters, if they do fail, it's not their fault. It's not their fault because of societal reasons and things like that. And I think that's a bit of a cop-out. I think that we want to see, and again, like we talked a little bit about this when we talk about didacticism, the politicization of things has sort of led us down a path that where we're unwilling to show people from characters that are played by people from certain groups failing because of a fear of, if we have them fail, then it's a comment on that person's group identity, and it's like we're saying, us, the TV show, are saying that they're failing or that they're inadequate, but really it's like you've got to treat them as a character. They're a character, and so I talk about this with my wife a bit as well. It's interesting times that we're in. I just wish we could forget about that, and you can cast whoever you want, but you have to. The character they're playing has to follow the path of the hero, and that is a pathway of inadequacy and failure.
Yeah, well, failure is growth. It's the opportunity for growth, maybe not growth in and of itself. I'm gonna go into a current like TV thing and hopefully not step on anybody's toes who disagrees with me. But I've been watching the 2nd season of Reacher on Amazon, and it's not done yet. But we've talked about Jack Reacher before on the podcast and about how he's not really, he doesn't change. He doesn't have a character arc. And so in a lot of the books, your secondary character is the one that goes on the journey and, has that character arc and the theme and all of that kind of attached to them. Jack Reacher's more of like a tool. He's more of a stagnant hero. He's kind of like what you're talking about. He already has the skills and the traits. And I think watching the 2nd season of Reacher, the story that they chose to tell, they're almost trying to make Reacher the hero. But he's not in that way that we want to see in story. He doesn't have someone who's going on that journey of growth. He did in the 1st season, and I think that's why everybody was like, wow, this is such a cool show. And then the 2nd season has been very much about Reacher. They're trying to make it about his internal arc, but he has all the skills. He does not fail. He does not enter a fight and leave crippled. He always wins. He always moves through even this last episode they were reviewing, he sent us these guys after us dead. He sent these guys after us. Oh, they're buried in a cement pit. He sent these guys after us. Oh, we did this. And I was like, that's the problem that I'm having right now. This feeling of like, I'm not getting anything out of this because there's no hero who is growing. All these people already have the skills. They already have, it's just like a showpiece of action violence. Like, ta-ta-ta-ta, we win. And they haven't solved the mystery yet. And so there's a little bit of intrigue still there, but like the hero, the journey, that growth, that ability to gather skills and reach for a climax, it just feels inevitable because it's not there, if that makes sense.
No, it's great that you chose that example. I haven't seen the show, but I have seen the first Tom Cruise film of it.
Mm-hmm.
And my issue with that film was exactly that. I hadn't read the book, so I didn't realize, okay, he doesn't change. But that was the main thing I came away from that film. As much as I like everyone who made the film and their stuff, I just didn't think it worked that well as a film because of that issue. He doesn't have any inadequacies and fail. But conversely, the other big character that Tom Cruise plays, Ethan Hawke, you could, on the surface, see him as always winning and never failing. But and I haven't seen the latest ones, but what they've started to realize with his character was that they was like, well, he can do everything. So what they invented was, let's make it so that his wife, he's had to hide her away, and he can't be with her to protect her. But then he has to also witness from afar her fall in love with another guy and his own marriage fall apart. And he's had to make the decision to let that go for the sake of humanity. Like, he's got, on the one hand, he's got everyone in the world, and on the other hand, he's got his own marriage, the woman that he loves, and he's had to make that choice. And that's, I think, it works really, really well. And that's what you have to do with a character like that. It's the sort of Superman paradox. You know, they're invulnerable to most conventional attacks and the conventional risk, but that's why you've got to hit them with an emotional
something else.
Risk.
Yeah, something else where they can't succeed in the way that they maybe do in everything else. And then there's opportunity for growth. And I agree with you. Those movies are significantly better.
That's
in
why.
terms of character development.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes. No arcless protagonists.
No.
No,
Well,
unless you're
arc
going to
protect-
pair them, you know, with
Well,
the
like I said, the
supporting
first
character.
season of Reacher, I feel like it did that really well. It paired Reacher with two people that needed his influence in order to grow into being the people that they could be. Like, they needed him pushing them. And I think that's what's so clever about the Lee Child series and about the way that he's crafted that, is that he uses Reacher as a tool. You know, and he is that blunt instrument in a lot of ways, that just, he is the smasher, and then that works through other characters. But they're just trying too hard to make him the protagonist, and he's not. So yeah, recognize that when you've got it. If I've got a superhero who this is what I want them to be, well, then you better surround them by people that, you know, need to grow or need to, you know, they'll be the hero. Your superhero maybe isn't.
Right. Well, and I don't watch or read Reacher, but another thing that comes to mind is I know he's a drifter, so he doesn't have any emotional attachments, and like Superman had Lois Lane. So you've got someone who's an arcless protagonist who doesn't have, you know, Sherlock's Dr. Watson. He doesn't have a Dr. Watson figure, and he also doesn't have a Lois Lane figure. So how can we emotionally invest in him? It's just getting a fix of violence, right? I mean, that's what the show becomes about. When your hero doesn't have these supporting characters to interact with and play off of and to shape your arc.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they had to do that with supporting characters shows that there's just a desperate need for that from anyone who engages with a film or TV show. If they can't do it with their main protagonist, they do it with supporting characters, because they know this is what people latch onto, really, the emotional journey. Well, it's what keeps them. That's what makes them feel satisfied when you get to the 10th episode. You know, my wife and I have just finished the Boys, and that was something I had to be convinced by someone to watch, you know, because I said, no, I've done enough. I've done enough superheroes. And he said, no, Tim, just watch the first 20 minutes. And I said, well, that's what I always say to you. And he's like, I'm using your line on you. But he was right. And and they put effort into every one of those superheroes. I'm doing quotes to show that they're all inadequate in various ways, even though, they might have superpowers. They've got these deep emotional inadequacies, and it comes out in these amazing ways. And you find yourself, the reason why I think why this is important is because maybe we haven't made this point strong enough, but what you're wanting is empathy from an audience, and an audience cannot empathize with somebody who doesn't fail. And that's why, again, there's probably been a bit of an audience apathy towards a lot of stuff that's made today, because there's too many characters that just don't really fail enough. And if they fail, the story finds a way to make it not their fault. And I think that's bad. I think that's really poor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, because for me, it doesn't really matter who's on screen, what they look like, what their ethnicity is, whether they're even human or not. If they're suffering, then they've got my empathy.
Right.
And so if you remember that, then you'll be fine. But you've got to make them suffer.
Oh, poor heroes.
I know. I'm just be mean. Get out your pen and get mean.
It'll all be all right in the end. Pat's head.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. So, any last thoughts on heroes before we wrap up the show?
I just think that what we admire most is just somebody who's unprepared, ill-equipped, untrained, choosing to face overwhelming odds. There's something very deeply human about that we all respond to emotionally. And that should be the kind of trait that you're looking for to put into your hero. And to just remember that they're there to express the theme of your story through action, and that they're not actually a real person, and they can do whatever you really want them to do as long as it's within the realm of plausibility that you've set up in your world.
Yes, thank you. That is a great summary. So where can our audience find you, Tim?
I don't have a very big presence online because I try to stay away from social media in general. I mean, I have accounts. Yeah, I know.
That's how we are too.
Yeah, we're all social media ghosts.
I want to be happy in life. I don't want
right.
So but I do. I have a website, and I have a Twitter account, X account, and I have a YouTube channel that I occasionally post things to. So people can find me there. If you just Google me, Tim Auld, Tim Auld filmmaker will probably get you there, because there's a few other Tim Aulds. But and my Twitter handle is @RideTheWriting. As in, I'm a Metallica fan, so it's an homage to Ride the Lightning, the album. But yeah,
nice.
Ride the Writing. You can find me there, and send me all of your hate.
Great. Yes. And we will link to all of that in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.